We're
didn't
recording,
have holes
Dust.
in mine.
We are recording.
Yes,
Good.
because I was telling you off air about my toes.
Yeah.
Was that too much?
Did you want to
No, I don't think so. Was that TMI?
It was a lot. For our second meeting, it was a lot.
It just got to that stage where I was halfway through telling the story of both. Oh, we'll tell it now because we're on air again. But being, athletes, like, you're an athlete, I a has-been athlete. But what is common in physical sport is getting your feet stepped on. True?
All the time.
Yeah, if you don't have quick toes. And my feet, it's got like 4 years out and my toes are so sore because they're all broken on one side of my foot, which has developed a bit of a sore toes, and I had to go get them lasered. And
What does the laser do?
so it's athlete's foot basically is the medical term. I'm sure there's another medical term to it, but the toes have like fungi growing in them now. It sounds really bad, but it's not as bad as it actually is. The laser kills off the fungi, I'm pretty sure. Or like,
We've gone further this time than we did
Stop
last
asking-
time, and I regret
stop
it.
asking questions
I need to
about
stop.
it.
Last time I just sat silently. I should have
it's-
stopped
okay.
asking questions.
We'll cut that out. Hey, Chloe, how are you?
Yeah, great.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Honour, pleasure, privilege to have you on. First question, how flexi is it and when do you use like the OAM,
Oh, yeah, wow, we're going there.
Order of Merit?
Close. Order of Australia medal.
Thank you.
Medalist? Medal,
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
I have it on I think it's on my LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Maybe about that.
Really? Did you put
Yeah.
it on Instagram or anything? You know what
I
I'm
need to
saying?
check my bio.
Yeah. What about it's not on a license or anything like that? Like where does it, I'm actually curious to where it sort of goes and where it doesn't.
I have like one email signature that I
So
do it.
good.
Like if I'm trying to ask, like if I'm trying to request something.
It's a fantastic piece of deserved reputableness.
It is quite reputable, but only for like a certain age group and above.
Yeah, okay.
like
So you
there's a lot
find it's
of,
more of the older age group, really. Yeah.
I think so.
Oh, I think it's quite pretty awesome. So you're our third Order of Australian medal
Yeah, right.
on the show. So we've had Richard Harris. He's actually Australian of the Year,
Cool.
but he's OAM, and Dylan Alcott.
Well deserved.
So you're in they're in fantastic company. You're in fantastic company. It's pretty cool. It really is
pretty
cool.
cool.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
How did that come about?
Yeah, it was a pretty cool day we got a letter in the mail after the gold medal in Rio,
Yeah.
inviting us to come along to the ceremony. And it was one of those things, I remember sitting there in the ceremony and we were watching people go up before us because ours was for service to sport.
Yeah.
And there was this group of like 4 or 5 guys that got up before us and there'd been this avalanche and they'd done CPR for something like 14 hours straight to save people's lives. And it felt a little bit ridiculous that we just had played rugby and won a gold medal and we were kind of put in that category. But I think like the further along my career and I've come to understand like the power of sport, I think there's part of me that understands why that is a category in a way, not saying that what we do is ever going to be close to saving people's lives in an avalanche. But I think it was an interesting moment at the time being like, do we really need to be here for
No,
this?
for sure. I'm not just saying this, but I think genuinely what you do, not just from like a female athlete point of view, but in terms of sport in general, like the more I've been out of sport, I've realised that no matter what people do, there's just this cut through that sport can have that nothing else can have, and it's pretty crazy. Like you go down to, I always think like when I go down to the rooms and see something, or you're just at the club, or you watching whatever it is around AFLW, AFL men's, and I don't know, it's just the way people look at athletes and look at sport and resonate with it. It's a really powerful thing that I don't think we actually realise when you're in the thick of it.
Yeah, I think it's almost a hard thing to verbalize. And I think there's something as an athlete that no matter what environment you walk into, like even if I'm somewhere where people might not know what Aussie rules is, there's like almost a level of immediate interest and respect that comes with it that allows you to have a lot of conversations that previously you might not have had.
Talk us through your journey to start, like to set the where you are today and how it's all come about. Like how did it begin? Where did you grow up? Where did you start playing sport? And was rugby the first thing that you started doing?
No, I grew up on Northern Beaches in Sydney and
Whereabouts on the Northern Beaches?
Mona Vale.
Mona Vale.
Do you know Mona Vale? It's pretty far
It's
north.
a beautiful place. I
It's
love
lovely.
North Sydney. I really love North Sydney. I've been to obviously Manly and stuff with friends, but there's a place Newport.
Oh, yeah.
Newport Arms, the pub
It's
there
a
with
good spot.
Birds. Is it Birds?
Yeah, Birds.
Oh,
Good food.
That is just, is that the area you're talking? Are you that far?
Mona Vale's like one suburb closer than Newport.
Wow, yeah.
So it's a fair way.
That is a beautiful part of the world.
It's quite lovely. Yeah, so it was a good upbringing, lots of time spent in the backyard, down at the beach doing nippers. We kind of played a whole range of different sports. I'm in the middle of two brothers and we were pretty competitive. In particular, my older brother and I were pretty competitive out in the backyard. And it was... I was doing cross country at the time, and it was when I was 7 years old that I watched Cathy Freeman. I know a lot of Aussies and a lot of athletes have their Cathy Freeman moment, and for me, I just was so blown away in this moment as she like walked out onto the track and zipped up that custom-made Nike bodysuit and pulled the hood over her head, and the way she just like raced with the weight of a nation on her shoulders. I was pretty mind blown and decided in that moment that I wanted my very own Olympic gold medal. And Mum got me to write it down in the scrapbook. Mum used to do scrapbooking back in the day.
That's fantastic.
It was awesome, you know, like coding like the cardboard and the photos and everything. Anyway, she got me to write down and I kind of wrote about that dream of standing on the Olympic podium. I didn't really know what sport it was going to be. I found basketball at about the age of 11 or 12 and kind of worked my way up through the ranks. The year after I finished school, started playing in the WNBL with the Sydney Uni Flames. But I sat on the bench a lot. Like I was like full Patty Mills towel waving level of like hype.
How was the tail waving though? Like,
yeah, it needed work.
Okay.
It needed work. Like I would like have games with myself where I'd count like how many high fives can I give out this game. You know, when you're like you're there for that long that you're like I need to find a way to do
stretch
something.
The legs. Stretch the legs a bit. Yeah. Funnily enough, I do know exactly what you're saying. Actually, often didn't think I'd be able to relate, but I can. Yeah.
And so I kind of got to this point where I was like, I wanted to play for the Opals. I wanted to represent my country in basketball and go to the Olympics, but I had to be realistic about the fact that I was warming the bench and was still a fair way off the Opals. So I went home and typed into Google list of Olympic sports.
Wow.
And had a look at a few different options, contemplated triathlon because I was good at cross country, not bad on a bike, but I didn't like swimming. So I crossed that off. I thought I was a bit late in life to start taekwondo. Cross that off.
It's a niche art.
It's too niche, I think. And then I saw rugby sevens was going to be in the Rio Olympics for the first time in 2016, and I'd grown up in a rugby family. Being from Sydney, it's a big sport back home, and I knew the game really well. Right, like my dad had played, both my brothers had played. We'd always watch the Waratahs and the Wallabies across the weekend. Like I knew the sport so well. I didn't know how to play, but I had this great understanding of the game. So I think I gave myself just under 3 years out from the Olympics to try and make that team to get on the plane.
How old were you at that stage?
I was 20.
Wow.
20 years old at that point.
It's incredible to have that, like, well, there's so many things I want to talk about. To go back to the start, like writing that scrapbook. There's no point in my mind, like I'm a massive, you've seen the Richie McCaw doco, like when he writes like, not just be a great, wants to be a great All Black. Like there is such a big thing when you're a kid and, you know, being a dad now myself, that when you can formulate those ideas when you're a kid and you actually put something into your brain, it's crazy what does come to fruition, isn't it? Like, it's mental. Have you reflected on that just as a whole? Yeah,
it's pretty bizarre. Like, I think, like, if I look at, like, the Cathy Freemans and the Lauren Jackson and the Anna Mears, like, these athletes that I looked up to think that I became an athlete who actually competed at that level, and the fact that I've got an Olympic gold medal in my drawer, like it's weird that kid actually went on to achieve it, because there's so many different things that had to come together to allow that to happen.
Yeah.
Like even the fact that at the time, because it was becoming an Olympic sport for the first time, Rugby Australia were going out to all these different sports. Like they sent letters out to all the Australian touch footy players to say, hey, come and play rugby. Like we're pretty much putting together a team for the Olympics. Like the fact that I was in that exact right time where I had a lot of teammates who were learning the game at the same time as me, and we were in a really elite, high performance environment. But the fact that that worked out is pretty crazy.
It's unbelievable. Jumping ahead a little bit here, because I've actually got so many parts where I want to come back to the part around Olympics, obviously. But I think one thing that we'll talk about a little bit later is, and I'm really identifying now with your journey and your story, is the representation of elite female athletes. And you talk about like Lauren Jackson, Cathy Freeman, Anna Mears, then like, you know, I'm sure there was a few others that are in that case, but then fast forward now and that representation of like how many more factors that can hit of young girls coming through is crazy.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you've got cricketers, footballers, soccer players, like Matildas, like just all of that stuff that just wasn't there when you were young. And I think that's like a really cool part. And so why I love the Female Athlete Project is the biggest thing is representation. And I fully get that now. Like you look at all these people too, it's not about what's happening at the moment, or it is, but it's not about that. It's about the long journey of this and how powerful that can be for a whole next generation of people coming through, which is really cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did I hit the nail on the head there?
Yeah, you nailed that.
Thank you, because it's great. But I want to touch on that more later. While we're on the topic, this is another really weird thing that no, it's nothing to do with the foot thing. It's to do with just in general of growing up. So one day, if you want to start a family and you have a son and a daughter, and I got my son at the moment, one day I hope to have a daughter or whatever else we have, playing multiple sports at a young age, how do you think that helped you formulate like being able to play multiple sports? Because I look back now, I only played footy, really. Like I never played anything else. And now I suck at everything. Like I struggle to play golf. Like I've sort of got that a bit of athleticness, but nothing comes naturally to me.
Yeah, right.
But it's such a blessing, like at a young age, like disregarding the fact that you've obviously done what you've done, but how cool to play so many different sports and then be able to do different things.
Yeah, I had a really good conversation with another female athlete recently about this idea of, I think a lot of female athletes have had to become versatile, not necessarily by choice. Like I love the fact that I can play multiple different sports, but a lot of it is because we haven't, like you could grow up watching the AFL and you want to be a footy player, right? None of us, people my age, had that opportunity to do that. I didn't see the pathway to do it. So I was kind of like, maybe I'll try it here. Maybe that's my avenue to do it. But I'm so thankful because I feel like it makes me a much more well-rounded athlete being able to do that. Yeah,
well, there's pros and cons of it, right?
Yeah,
and it's
for
like,
sure.
as you said then, I hadn't thought about it from that point of view of like, yeah, well, you've had to do that because of the pathway. But yeah, I think that even just in general, I'm thinking just with my dad hat on at the moment of like Max, I'm like, I just want him to like have fun doing as many sports as possible and not just like commit to one thing and just work out what that is. And I saw this TikTok, funnily enough, the other day about it. And I was like, if you want to be just a good, well-rounded athlete in life, it's like do as many, and then as the years go, you just slowly narrow down more and more. But when you're young and building those little like fine motor skills, it's so hard to pick them up later, which I'm really finding now. So I just thought that was another side point.
I reckon play as many sports as you can as a kid. It definitely helps.
So you make the 7 squad. Mm-hmm. How does that sort of go? Like, how did it work? Like with the whole, like people trying out from touch footy, like how big was the squad? How many people are in the team? How many go to the Olympics?
Yeah, so back then I think the squad was about 25 players. I came in a little bit later, so they centralised early in 2013 down at the Narrabeen Academy of Sport, which was conveniently pretty close to my place. Mm-hmm. So they were training full time, and I came in a little bit later to the piece, learned how to tackle on the sand down at the local beach for a bit of a softer landing, and then got out in the backyard with both my brothers and put all the protective equipment on I could find to learn how to tackle properly. And yeah, I played locally and then was selected for the state team. I so clearly remember I went to nationals and I was playing against some of the best Aussie Sevens players. They were playing for Queensland, I was playing for New South Wales, and they just ran absolute circles around me. I was like, I just remember this drive home with Dad from Canberra in the car, and we kind of looked at each other and I was like, have I just given up that basketball dream for nothing? Like maybe this isn't the go. But we got home and a couple of days later I got a call from the head coach of the Aussie Sevens, and he was like, we loved watching you at nationals. We think you've got a lot of potential. So I got invited to come and train at a couple of camps with the Aussie team, and after those camps was invited to train full time with the squad. And from there I then had to work out like, how do I go from being this fringe player to actually not only getting selected in the team of 12 that travels to these tournaments across the world and the 12 that go to Rio, but actually cement my spot in the starting 7 as well. And it's kind of funny because it was my trying a whole lot of things as a kid that actually set up this opportunity for me, because when I'd go down to Rat Park, our local footy ground, and watch my brothers play rugby as a kid, I'd always take a cone out and kick and try and convert from the sideline. Like I'd just kick over. I just loved it. And so then fast forward to being this 20-year-old trying to work my way into the Aussie team. in my debut tournament for Australia, we were playing up in Noosa in an Oceania tournament, and mucking around, I was just kicking a few drop kicks, and the coach looked over, he's like, can you drop kick? And because in sevens, if people haven't watched, you drop kick to restart the game and also for a conversion for an extra 2 points after you score a try. And I was like, I don't know anything technical, but I can kick, like I've just always kicked. And he was like, all right, like let's do a few. I ended up starting as the kicker, and we played in the final against New Zealand, and I was the starting kicker for Australia in my debut tournament in rugby sevens.
That's unreal.
It was like mind-blowing, and it was kind of this cool opportunity where my other skills probably weren't at the standard of the other players because I was still pretty fresh to the game. But what it actually did is because I got this opportunity to be in the starting side, it actually allowed my other skills to catch up faster because I was just getting minutes and playing under pressure and doing all of those things.
That's unreal. Isn't it crazy? Like I don't follow league at all, but like it shocks me why they don't put more effort into learning how to kick.
Yeah, it's a big part.
It's a massive part. It's
a
different, a total different kick and ball, obviously, but crazy. What did you learn from traveling, like going to the Olympics, like obviously qualifying, getting in, competing at that high of a level against other countries for your country? Like, is it like, you hear a lot about the opals and diamonds and boomers about like, that patrioticness of playing for your country. In the world we're in today, it's sort of like a really nice place where the country does come together and you feel like you are representing Australia. Like, did you feel that? Yeah,
I think like pulling on the Australian jersey was something that every single time we got to do it. And it's funny in sevens because you play 6 games over a weekend.
Yep.
So it's pretty condensed. So you do it 6 times in a row. So it's like, it's not something that's necessarily few and far between, but I think when you do it, like standing in that change room, and I think the Aussie Sevens have done an incredible job of kind of carrying that idea. I know the Opals have built this incredible legacy with what it means to represent your country, and the Boomers have done a similar thing. And I think for us, it was like, we had these letters that we'd pin up in our locker, no matter where we were in the world. We had these letters, and mine was from my family, and they just, oh God, I'm going to cry. They just talked about like what it meant to them to watch me represent our country on the world stage. And it was just like, because I think like when you play sport at that level, like it can get a little bit, there can be a bit of repetition, right? Like sometimes that feeling can kind of wear off. And so I think it's really cool to have something that's almost a really consistent thing to go back to actually be in the moment and remind yourself like, this is pretty damn cool that I get to pull on the Australian jersey.
Such a good point. I got goosebumps when you said that, because I think for me personally, anything I do, like ultimately all you want to do is make the people that love you proud of like what you're doing. So it's like when you hear that, it's like, I don't know what it is. Like I feel like I'm a stable person. I'm definitely not a stable person, but I feel like I'm somewhat got things together until it's like someone says they're proud of you. And then I'm just like, oh fuck, that's all you want to do. Yeah. So like having that as motivation, I wish I knew that a bit more when I was playing sport, because you don't realize it until you finish, I don't think. Yeah. Well, you didn't, but yeah.
Yeah, and you just like, it's one of those things if you don't sit in it and think about, I don't think you understand the impact that it has.
You're not really doing it for yourself.
Yeah.
It's very easy to let yourself down, I found. Even for me, like everything I do now is like trying to think how it makes other people feel that are there, because if you put that ownership on it, you're going to probably get it done, versus if you say you want to do it, it's quite easy to ignore yourself. Probably not the best point of like motivation to be self-driven and stuff, but I find that for me that's a really good motivator.
Yeah, and I think like people talk about sport being a really selfish pursuit in a way, because I think as an athlete, like you got to put things in place to perform. But the outcome, I think, that a lot of athletes are seeking is not necessarily just for themselves.
Definitely. That final game with the gold medal, was it like an elimination process over the weekend, or was it just like, you play in your fields, they get grouped down, and then there's ultimate gold, silver, bronze finish?
Yeah, so we play, they split us up into pools, and so you play 3 pool games.
Yep.
And then we topped our pool, so we went through, and that meant that we didn't cross over with New Zealand, who we were expecting to face in the final, until that gold medal match. So yeah, won our quarterfinal, and then winning at semi-final. I think we played Canada in the semi-final, and that was the best moment, like, because it was a guaranteed medal no matter what happened. Like, you know, we were in that match, we were either coming home with gold or silver. And coming up against New Zealand in that final was this big build-up, because as a group we'd done a lot of work around like focusing on the fact that we were going to win a gold medal, because we went in as favourites. We were world champs that year. Australia hadn't won a gold medal in a team sport since 2004 in Athens in the men's hockey, and the women's was 2000 in the Sydney Olympics. So it had been a really long time.
No team sport had won a gold medal?
No, not since then.
Jesus.
So we felt the pressure of that, right? Like we were going in as favourites, as the Golden Girls, I think was kind of the name they were going with. And we'd made a really clear decision to kind of embrace that level of pressure and talk about the fact that we were going there to win a gold medal. And so lining up, singing the national anthems before we ran out, we kind of were all just like, I just felt like we were ready for it. And it was the most bizarre thing that game. Like I played every minute of the game, but I don't remember a single part of it.
Bit of flow state.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. The adrenaline in a moment like that is like hard to compare, I think.
Wow. How cool. Well, I've very rarely been in that sort of flow state, but when you are in that feeling of just like things just going your way and you can't even remember the game and it's just all like on autopilot, obviously it's a culmination of work over such a long period that gets you to that stage as well. Curious when you're talking about going there and like to win the gold and all these bits and pieces, like we do so much chatting here about sport and, you know, the psychology of sport and the mindset. And it's like interesting now that you're obviously AFLW playing footy and you've got this thing where it's like, well, if you lose, you got next week. Like, you know, it's very easy to, it's not easy, but it's like, there's always sort of next week until it's the end of the season. And then you miss out on the grand final. Well, you got next year.
Yeah.
But it just always fascinates me with the Olympics and, you know, world championships being they probably rotate every 2 to 4 years. It's like, no, well, if you go there, like this is the time to get it done and to do it. And Jonah Oliver was really cool. We had him on. He's worked a lot with Olympic teams and he's Cam Smith's actual psychologist from the golf stuff. And he's like, yeah, it's a different ball game when you're in the Olympics. And a big thing that people do is they say you need to lift for the occasion, but it's actually the opposite. You actually just need to do what you've already done. Yeah. What was your experiences with that? Like, what was the messaging going in? Do you feel like that was the message, or do you feel like it was, would you agree or disagree?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point. Our coach did a lot around our strategy in the lead up, and we'd have so many different scenarios planned out. Like at the end of every single training session in the lead up, we'd have a scenario.
I love scenario training.
I'm a
sucker for it.
I'm all about it.
Yeah.
There's something about it, isn't there?
Well, it's just, can you explain what scenario training means, by the way? Like, I think it's genuinely what any sport level should be doing. Yeah. But especially local sport, like if they can pick a few up a bit of scenario training, I think it's like the best thing ever. Yeah.
So I'll talk about it in the rugby sevens context. Yep. So we'd get towards the back end of our training session. The coach would like run and go pick a spot, put the ball on the ground. Green team, your tap. Yep. You're 40 metres out from the try line. We're playing against Spain. You're down 14-12. You have to score. The buzzer's
30 seconds
gone.
left or something.
Yeah. You have to score in order to progress to the semi-final at the Olympics. Yep. What are you going to do? And then you go. Yeah. And then it could be you're winning. You got to get the ball out. What are you going to do? Like it's just like
you need to hold the lead. You need to, you know, this play's gone down. Who fills in?
Yes.
I found that sort of training, it's better than anything you can do because in the heat of the moment, you just go back to what you know. Speaking to what I know, like with footy sense, I always talk about this, but Brennan Bolton, who was at Hawthorn and, you know, with Clark, I feel like he must have been quite a big one in the football world to bring that in. But like, yeah, it's just crazy when you talk to all those players that sort of played under him and any team, like even the Giants were sort of doing it as we're leaving, but it's just so important to put those scenarios in place. Even, it doesn't have to be to win the game, but even half-time, hold a lead, want to slow things down, where do you go? And for context, anyone out there, I'm sure you're aware, but when the teams do hold up the posters, it could be whatever's on like a red circle, green circle. I've seen some weird ones this year, but it could, that's what that is. Like they're going to scenarios that they've trained where they're in a certain position, they're trying to sort of just get the game back on their terms. Yeah. It's really important. I love that. What was the ending scenario? Did any actually get used in the final?
He even tried to throw a scenario at me in the Olympics. So we were in the last pool game, we were playing against the USA and they were up, which I'm sure was a scenario we'd practiced, and we scored after the buzzer, but we were still down. I think we were down 12-10. And so I had to make the conversion to draw the game for us to still top to top the pool to go through to get the right crossover. Wow. So Craig, who was our S&C coach who was running water, runs out to me before I'm about to kick and he goes, well, she says, pretend it's for the gold medal. And I was like,
fuck up.
We're at the Olympics. We're not doing, scenarios are cancelled. Scenarios are done. There is no time.
Scenario,
this is it. This is what we train for. Anyway.
Where was the conversion from?
Probably about 10 to 15 metres.
You can add some.
I think it was 45 metres
on the
out.
boundary. Yeah, that's fucking sick.
I thought
that actually because we were watching it before. That's
pretty
impressive.
Good
Yeah, it's really good.
I drained it.
Yeah. Post Olympics, obviously, you get your Order of Medal Australia. What is
sure.
I can't remember what the thing stands for. Sorry, Order Australian Merit Medal.
No merit.
Where's the merit thing going from?
I don't know. That up.
Order of Medal Australia. Anyway,
I just spat.
It was a great thing. When did the books come into play?
Yeah,
like obviously there was one after one, and then there was another one. They weren't at the same time, I'm assuming. But were they in that gap?
They were just last year. So
last year, right?
Yeah. So I got I had an editor from Allen and Unwin slide into my DMs.
From which company?
Allen and Unwin, publishers, and her name was Tessa, and she sent a message. She's like, have you ever thought about writing a book? Yeah. And I was like, oh no, she's going to like ask me about an autobiography, and I'm not. That's not me. I'm not doing that.
45 metre out on the boundary.
There could have been. I actually could have written a whole book about that kick. And I was a little bit hesitant because I was like, I'm not doing that. And she said, oh no, I've actually been following the Female Athlete Project. I love what you do. I think it's the perfect time, and I think you're the right person to write a book about women's sport as a whole.
Yeah.
So I sat down to do it. I wish I got a ghostwriter. It was hard work.
Yeah, it's tough.
It was really hard work, right? I think it's one of those things now because I wanted to provide insight. Because people always see the end product, right? Like when you watch AFLW on the telly, you see the end product, and I think there's a very natural comparison that people make between the women's and the men's game. Mm-hmm. But a lot of time there's not this understanding of what has actually led to that point. What are some of the barriers that they've faced? What are some of the successes that they've had to get to that point? And so I wanted to kind of provide an insight across a whole range of different areas from my personal stories, other athletes' stories, and also bring in, I'm a bit of a data nerd, like I wanted to bring in some good studies and statistics and stuff, because I think it's all well and good for me to sit here and say like, you should invest in women's sport and you should support women's sport just because it's my opinion. But I really wanted to make sure that it was actually backed up by research to support what I was saying.
For sure.
So that one's pretty cool. Like my biggest thing is I wanted it to be in the airport. I don't know why. I think because I travel a fair bit with footy and work. Like I just like always really liked the idea of walking past and seeing it at the airport.
And you've seen it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool.
It's cool.
What was your biggest finding from the book? Like if there was one message you wanted someone to walk away with from the book, and I know it's a sort of culmination of the podcast and your journey and stories and obviously facts as well, but what would you think on that was the most powerful piece that stands out to you? I
think going to the data piece, I think I spent a lot of time researching, and I think for me it was a really cool process of understanding a lot of things I think historically that had happened with women's sport to the point that it's at today. But some of my favorite data throughout this process it's by a company called True North Research, and they do a lot of work looking at fans' emotional connections with athletes and with sporting teams. And so what they found is that a lot of the women's teams and female athletes end up topping the list of emotional connection with their fans based on the factors are like pride, trust, respect, enjoyment, and things like that the fans have with the athletes. Because I think the female athletes almost are forced to, like similar to my idea of like having to play a few different sports, you're almost forced to, as a female athlete, be more appealing in terms of like you almost have to be very well presented in a professional context. You have to be able to speak on a panel. You have to be able to run your social media channels and build your profile because you don't naturally get to build your profile.
You don't have the luxury of just not wanting to do it.
Yeah. And so I think there's it's cool to have data that supports that fact, but taking that another step further, what they found is because that emotional connection with the female athletes and the women's sports teams are really strong, the fans also carry that feeling of trust and pride and respect into the sponsors that actually support the female athletes and the women's sporting teams. And I think to me, having like kind of cold hard data like that proves a point that women's sport is worth investing in is really important to challenge these like really long held assumptions about the fact that women's sport is like this charity case or like a good cause to support. So I think that was the cool thing throughout the book, is trying to put together bits of information to support this idea that it's not just what you should do to support a good cause.
It's actually really interesting because as you say that, I'm thinking straight away to sponsors. Like for some reason, Harvey Norman just jumps out to me.
Isn't that interesting?
And like, I've never thought about that before, but it's like as soon as you say like female sport to me, and that's probably like they're probably if they listen to this, they'd be like, oh my god, that's incredible that you're doing that. But it's like, I just straight away think of that because I'm like, that's a brand that I always see affiliated with women's sport, and supporting and stuff like that. And there's probably multiple others that jump to mind, but straight away that was something I just thought of.
Yeah, and it's a positive sentiment that a lot of the fans have because they're supporting the teams, which is pretty cool.
Very cool. The Female Athlete Project, if we go back to go forward about, obviously Girls Don't Play Sport, that's the name of the book. I love how it's got the cross, the brackets.
Big cross through the don't.
Yeah, it's great. It's very smart. How did it start? Where did it come from? When was the first idea? And did you imagine was the goal of it to ever be something like this? Like, what was the initial thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think I realised when we first started that it was going to get to the point that it's at. Probably a major reason for me starting it was back in 2017 when I was still at Rugby. I was an ambassador for Our Watch. So for people that don't know about Our Watch, it's an incredible organisation that do a lot of work in the promotion of gender equality for the prevention of domestic violence. And they brought me on board. Well, I was approached to become an ambassador. And obviously domestic violence is a really prevalent issue in Australia, but it's something that I didn't necessarily at the time feel like I was equipped to be an ambassador for. I didn't know if I was the right person to do it. So they said, like, just come and do the training and then you can make a call from there. If you don't want to do it after that, that's completely fine. So I did this training day, and two really big components of the training day that really stuck with me was firstly this underlying driver of domestic violence is the power imbalance that exists and the gender inequities that exist. There's a lot of contributing factors around drugs and alcohol and a history of violence, but the big underlying factor is that power imbalance that exists, that these men believe that they are more valuable and should be more powerful than the women in their lives. But Our Watch do a lot of work in transitioning that into the sport space. And I was just kind of really taken aback after this training day of the power that sport has in Australian culture, similar to what we touched on earlier, that idea of being able to create conversations and almost having this level of interest and respect. But I think because it's such a big part of what we do, whether it's on the telly in our lounge room on a Friday night, whether it's people taking their kids down to the park, whether it's people just having conversations about who won the footy on the weekend, whatever it is, it actually has the ability to form a lot of our attitudes and perceptions about more broader societal issues. And so coming away from that training and when I became an ambassador, it was the first time I actually realised that, yes, I can bring people joy when we win in sport and heartbreak when we lose, and there's all of those emotions that come with it, but I can actually use my platform as an athlete to do so much more. And so we started the Female Athlete Project in October of 2020, just in the garage of mum and dad's place on the beaches. And I'm really passionate about this idea of creating conversations with female athletes, so that people can see women existing in these spaces where they didn't exist before and they weren't necessarily welcomed before.
I love it. It's so interesting, and I think it's one of those things as well that I think a part of even chatting today, like there's things that I'm thinking about that I feel extremely guilty for, and it's not because they've been intentional, but it's just like sometimes when you don't have to worry about certain things, they're just not front of mind for you. And then it's like you think about, oh, fuck, like, yeah, you spoke before about taking the opportunity to actually have to build your profiles, and you look at some players and, they're not doing this in spite of certain things, but it's like, they go, no, I don't want to talk to the media. It's like, well, fuck, a lot of people would actually love to be able to do this. Yeah, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but it's almost like just acknowledging the fact that there is a level of incredible luckiness at the moment that the men's sport has, that obviously the women's sport is getting there in that sense, but it's basically trying to work out how can they work together in that space. Like, what have you found as a best practice for men and women's sport coming together? Like, is there anything yet that's like actually really impressed you or you've seen have big impact on both sports?
Yeah, I think it's definitely something that still is a big work in progress. I thought the NBA shootout with Steph Curry and Sabrina Ionescu was a really cool one to touch on. So she won the WNBA 3-point shootout last season. She's got the highest score of all time at 37 points. And so they put her up against Steph, and it was like this big token game, right? Like a big, what do you call it? Showcase event, right? Yep. So he won 29-26. But her score of 26 was equal to the winner in the men's actual competition. So Dame Lillard shot 26. So she would have actually won that in the men's competition. And she chose to shoot from the NBA line rather than from the WNBA 3-point line, because there was a lot of haters in the comments saying things like it doesn't count, she's closer to the hoop. So I think something like that was kind of a cool example of, like, you couldn't have a game of footy where men and women play against each other, like AFL and AFLW in the same game. But I thought that was quite a cool example of, like, what's an isolated skill that you can showcase where you can use it in a way that's like for entertainment, but it's also showing, like, it's also really challenging, because I think for a lot of people, there's this assumption that a woman could never be better than a man or than the man that's the best at their sport. And so I think that was really cool about the Sabrina v. Steph example, is that she is actually up in the very top of those men shooters, shooting from the NBA 3-point line, not the WNBA 3-point line. And there was some really cool data that actually came out that on the NBA page, I think the shootout between Steph and Sabrina accounted for like 42% of engagement and 26% of impressions. Yeah. And so it's again showing that, like, there's also this
people
idea
watching
that
this,
So I think that was kind of a cool example of a great way to do it, and showing that it does actually get engagement.
With the world that you're in now being obviously AFL, and this isn't a knock on footy or anything like that at all, but is there anything, like, I'm actually just brainstorming in my head and thinking about this, like, has there anything been done to that level? Like, obviously clubs at the moment, there's like whole of club and getting, connections together, but publicly around, like, would you like to see, and I think there's an obvious answer to this, but would you like to see more support or it? And I think that, to be honest, even just like from having this chat today, I'm just trying to think, I really honestly feel like this conversation is going to help a lot of the people listening to just make aware of these things that are going on. Because if there was a player, and they shouldn't be blind to this, then athletes shouldn't be blind to this in the men's game. But if there was an opportunity to support, it just needs to be really done.
Yeah, and I think it can be a really simple thing. And, like, our approach with the content that we do at the Female Athlete Project, we want 90+% of the content that we're putting out to be celebrating and a really positive thing of, like, hey, check out this incredible thing that this athlete has done, compared to going for the approach of, like, look how
it's not doing it. Or
like calling things out. And we absolutely will, when the time is right, call things out. But we wanted to come from the approach of, like, we often say the phrase, a rising tide lifts all boats, like coming from that idea of, like,
I often try to say that.
And get it wrong. And add merit in there.
That's it. The rising tide gives a lot of merit, is what I have to say. No, that's a really good point.
It's a deep laugh.
Sorry,
I'm
a very funny guy.
Yeah, wow. So we kind of come from this approach of, like, these conversations I think are really important, rather than me coming on and being like, Dyl, you suck at this. Like, why are you not, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I think just like, hey, this is my story, this is my experience, and hopefully it can make you a little bit more aware of what it might be like for a female athlete.
No, it's a great point. I think that there's definitely time for both, but I often think, and I don't know if this is rightly or wrongly, but I know what you're saying in that sense, where sometimes, and this shouldn't be the right way, it should be, but the internet's fucked. Like, well, we can talk about that later. But when there is, like, we're talking before off air about, like, this problem at the moment, which is a massive problem around young males, which you'd think it would be older males or older people that are in the older generation hurling online abuse at female athletes, which I was surprised today that you're saying it's actually a lot of a younger demographic. But then I think about it and I'm like, fuck, maybe I'm not surprised. Like, there needs to be better awareness of what's actually happening out there around this online stuff.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a confronting thing to realise. I think running a page that is constantly putting content out about women is like, sometimes we just get inundated with these troll comments. It's pretty horrendous a lot of the time, and I don't feel like I even have the resources to like block enough accounts at the rate that they come through. When a post goes viral, right, you know, when it just like takes off and that you just like almost can't keep up with it. And it's been really, really sad to see that a lot of these comments are coming from teenage boys. I kind of previously probably had the idea that we were waiting for the dinosaurs to kind of move on and then we'd all be okay in sunshine and rainbows, which was probably a little bit ignorant to think that it was going to be like that.
Yeah, I think everyone shared that ideology, but it's obviously not just that, is it?
Yeah, and I think there's probably just this really harmful idea that's probably perpetuated by a lot of content by certain platforms online of when women are being elevated and being given opportunities to just become equal, not to become higher than men in any respect, but just to become equal. I think it's this myth that's kind of shared around the idea that it's going to take opportunities away from men and boys, and this idea that it's one pie that we all have to share from, compared to actually taking a step back to realize that having diverse opinion, diverse people, diverse thought in certain contexts is actually something that's really beneficial. Like even in a footy context, like having the AFLW brings not only just like a whole realm of new players to the game, but it can tap into this audience that might not have ever felt welcomed in the game of footy before. And so I think it's, rather than like looking at it like, oh no, the AFLW is going to take away from the AFL. Like I think it's looking at it like it actually really just opens up the potential for where new areas that you can grow into.
100%. And you know, we had Hunter on the show from RMIT, who I'm not sure if you've ever heard much of his stuff, but it was crazy to talk about just actually this the AFL as a business and how, you know, how strategic and how smart they actually are. Not just from obviously a diversity sense in terms of like getting male and female sport elevated to the best level, to go back, he actually said, Darcy Parkinson, he was saying that cricket's actually done the best job. Am I right? In female sport, they're saying cricket's actually probably the best in terms of like full time.
Led the way
like they've led the way in a lot of these things. So AFL sort of jumped on the back of what cricket had done. But he was saying, you know, it's not just good for all the things we've spoken about today in terms of diversity in sport, young boys and girls to be like, fuck, there's actually a pathway to elite sport that is, you know, will be a full-time option. But also the fact that the more people that are supporting sport, the more revenue dollars that go into it, the more people want to sponsor, the more both things benefit. So I think that anyone that actually does look into this and has probably half a brain is not the right context, but like that is serious about what they're doing, like they're not taking money off each other. Like, and even I feel like some AFL players have thought like, oh, they're taking money off, you know, my salary. It's like, mate, it's different money. It's not like, it's not the contract. Your contract's fine. Yeah. Okay? Like it's got a total different thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's just working out how to actually educate people on that message and that understanding.
Well, it's almost like too, like, I don't know if this is a way to explain it, but it's almost like this argument at the moment too with the AFLW, like, oh, it's not making money yet. It's like, it's an investment. Like you buy a house, it doesn't make money straight away. Like it will though in 5 and 10 and 20 years, like it'll be booming. So there's that argument as well, which I'm sure is, you know, the smarter heads are actually sort of working towards.
And I think the Matildas, we haven't chatted World Cup yet, but I think Football Australia is a really great case study, and we can talk about cricket as well, right? Like the fact that they've led the way in the women's game, they've invested in the women's game, and look at the performances of the Australian women's cricket team across multiple formats. But Football Australia were very deliberate in the investment they put into the Matildas, not just in terms of like player salaries and things like that, but the way that they set up that home tournament. Mm-hmm. And we kind of like see it again as spectators. We get to watch them, and they performed exceptionally, and the whole country kind of got on board with what they were doing. But we kind of again see that end product without understanding that Football Australia in a way took a risk a number of years ago, hosting the tournament and like having that whole process, knowing and hoping that their investment would pay off.
Yeah, it's really cool. What else like have you seen in that sense of like historically, but also in the relevancy now of sport and AFLW, cricket, soccer, all these sports have sort of taken a step forwards. Like, where do you think have been the big wins over the last couple of years? Or what are you proud of?
I think it's been really cool, particularly in the areas of like the collective bargaining agreements.
Yep.
I think that's been awesome. So the fact that we're in AFLW, we're moving towards that full-time range. I still think across a lot of the domestic sports in this country, the top tier players are okay because they can be in a position of doing it as a full-time job. But a lot of the time it's bringing those bottom tier players up.
Preach it, Hannah. Preach. It's tough.
It's tough.
Tough down there.
Tough work down at the bottom.
Yeah.
Bringing them up so they're not in this awkward limbo where they're still part-time, still need to have a job and that.
I can't get over the Sydney thing too. Like, I know the cost of living allowance and stuff from just AFL in general is not really a thing anymore. Not that I'm aware of, but it really is an expensive place up there. And like, I was speaking to a couple girls. A couple girls that got drafted to the Giants and talking about like living up there and like trying to get share houses and living out like 20, 30 minutes away from the club and having to work and stuff. Like, it's a different kettle of fish living in Sydney than it is Melbourne, and trying to be an elite athlete as well as doing all those things. Like, it's bloody tough to get through.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more that you have to consider. And for us being in Sydney, like, there's some awesome pathways, and we've seen like Zali Goldsworthy at the Giants, who was rising star this season. Like, we've got people like her coming through the pathways, which is awesome. But I think in terms of attracting talent from interstate, it's pretty hard when people are still on part-time salaries and having to deal with that cost of living. It's a rough ask a lot of the time.
Biggest challenges going forward and biggest opportunities going forward, what do you think they are?
I think the professionalisation is definitely a current challenge, and I think over time that's going to continue moving in the right direction. I think with that comes a number of factors that female athletes have to consider, particularly around fertility, what that looks like. It's a really big one because
it's a crazy one.
Yeah.
Like, for context, just because I am really interested in this and I've never had a discussion about it. Like, me and my wife went through fertility, obviously got a son. Now went through a couple of years of trying to conceive, and I was thinking, like, how would that be with, like, there's such decisions you have to make in that sense. Like, that could be really hard for athletes.
Yeah, and I think as athletes in the women's sports space can play for longer, right? Like, if there's more like contract security and the whole range of things, like a lot of the time your best years as an athlete are your most fertile years as a woman, which makes it really tricky. And there's the option to look at things like egg freezing, which then a lot of the time kind of get thrown around as a solution and almost a guarantee.
Yeah.
And I've done some work with Monash IVF, and I had a specialist on the podcast just recently talking about this idea of it's kind of an insurance policy to be able to freeze your eggs. But I think a lot of people sometimes view it as like, oh, it's fine, I'll just freeze them and then I'll get pregnant as soon as I finish sport. And so I think that's going to be a really big topic. And again, cricket's led the way with their pregnancy policies and parental policies.
Yeah, what's the go with those policies? Because just on the egg freezing and stuff as well, and IVF and those, like, firsthand, I know how expensive that can be. It's not a short cost of things, and it's not a guarantee, as you said, that even these things like can go first time and stuff.
Yeah.
And even just the toll it takes on the body if
For
you're
sure.
in mid-season or anything like that. I can't imagine that would nearly have to be done in an off-season if.
There's a lot to consider. I think pointing out the cost one is a big one, right? Because that can be a massive
it's like
barrier.
$10,000 nearly a pop to do.
Yeah, so that's a really big part of it. And then I think looking at the policy, so what they've actually got now is contract security. So with our recent AFLW CBA, we've actually now got, if you're pregnant, you actually have your contract preserved in a way. Yeah. So you actually can have a baby without fearing losing your spot. So I think that's a really important one. Yeah. And then also they've followed suit with sports like Cricket Australia that have actually put policies in place for a carer to be able to travel to games up to, I don't know what age the kid is, but to actually be able to travel so that you can play and compete without having to worry about childcare and things like that. Yeah.
It's crazy. And again, just things that embarrassingly I've just never had to think about, which is the reality for, there's obviously a lot of incredible benefits of being a woman, but just things that you have to be really planned on, these sort of things, where it's just another good point today for any young bloke listening out there. Like, you think, just go out there and play your career and just look after itself, whereas these are things that are really in the back of your mind whilst trying to compete at the highest level.
Yeah, for sure.
Crazy. So that's making good progression though. Like
Yeah.
it's in a good spot.
Yeah, I actually think it's been really cool to see the way the sports are recognising how important that is.
Did you say that's a part of the bargaining agreement at the moment in AFL?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is huge.
Yeah.
To have that security for players.
Crazy. Yeah. Yeah. Really good one. The Female Athlete Project, obviously it's, you're playing at the Giants as well, but that's taking up a lot of your time while you're not being an athlete. How's it running at the moment? Like, obviously we were just talking before about building out your team, those bits and pieces. Like what is like an ideal sort of client for the Female Athlete Project? And like, how is it, how can we help, that's the wrong question. How can that, be a really sustainable thing that keeps, ensuring that it's bringing light to important things? Like, what are you trying to build towards?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Our biggest mission, I guess, is about increasing the visibility of women in sport, because as we've discussed, there's a lot of barriers that impact, and I felt like we could have chosen to address any of them, and we wanted to make sure that we were just like, let's show people what these incredible athletes are achieving on a daily basis. So we do our weekly women's sports podcast, and then I've started back doing some long form interviews this year, which is hard in footy season. Yeah. Shout out to Producey for letting us use the studio space last week, banging some podcasts. Good pods.
Was it as hot as today?
Nowhere near.
I'm sweating up.
I'm dripping.
Yeah, my toes hurt.
I walked into that. Yeah. Walked right in. And the social content is a big one for us. So I think just in terms of getting on board to support, I think following along on socials and just like a simple reshare to your story when someone wins a world championship or wins a gold medal or breaks a world record or whatever that looks like. I think it's just a really, really easy thing to do. And then we just kind of talk about free things that you can do to support women's sport, and that's following your favorite athletes or pages on social media, watching it when it's on TV.
I would love to have seen, I get real nerdy on this shit, but like the amount, like I literally followed every single Matilda after the World Cup, and I would love to have seen the follow account of like some of the athletes post. It would have been crazy. I didn't like obviously see from what they were to where they got to, but especially like some of them would have grown immensely.
Hugely. Yeah. Yeah, like your Courtney Vines and stuff.
Yeah.
The hero, the cult hero.
Very cool. With the Female Athletes Project, so like how do you want that to like, is it going to be, do you want that to turn into like a sort of nearly media outlet, or is it like what do you see it happening like with your own sort of like shows and news articles, and like obviously you go out and do a lot of like great education and talks on certain things as well. Where do you see it sort of going? Is there like a goal to what you want it to be like?
Yeah, I get asked this a lot, and I probably need to have a better answer, because sometimes I feel like...
Well, what is it, young Chloe writing in the book of being at the Olympics, like I've actually found this as well, like you have to be somewhat clear on where you want to go, but not too clear.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that's almost the space we're in at the moment, where we've actually come in at this awesome time. Because we started in 2020, I feel like we've really been able to ride this wave of the momentum of women's sport, and I feel like we've put ourselves in a really good position in terms of the growth that we've had, that we can kind of take it in a few different directions. I think the media piece is definitely an area that we want to exist in. I think it's almost tempting sometimes when you're running a business to feel like you want to address all these different areas. But I think for us, that's definitely where we're really trying to nail down on at the moment. And it's like, I'm obviously an athlete, but I'm a qualified physio. Like I have no media background or anything. So a lot of the time I feel like I'm just in the deep end, just trying to work out how to swim. So it's a steep learning curve. But I think for us, as we are able to continue to bring more people on board, it's about getting the resources to keep creating more content about women's sport, whether that's podcast, written content, social content. That's definitely the space we want to exist in.
It's so interesting. Like I was thinking about this before as well, around content in general, like digital media space content. Like what ideally, say tomorrow, it's more of just a ballpark question. Say tomorrow you said you had X amount of dollars to commission a show that you wanted to create that's like brought to you by the Female Athlete Project. Like what would that show be?
I reckon at the moment it'd have to be women's football, like soccer football. Yeah.
And when's the next big thing for football coming up? Is there anything sort of in the works?
I think Paris 2024 is going to be.
That would make sense being the Olympics.
It's
It's a pretty big
the
thing.
pinnacle, I reckon.
Yeah, it is. It's a
up
pretty big
there.
thing. What about roles for business that you're trying to fill at the moment? What's your most number one thing you want in the door?
Podcast producer.
Producer.
Yeah. Are you
Darcy?
offering Darcy services?
I'm available. Apparently.
Thank you so much.
I was thinking the one thing that are you posting a lot of that content?
I've got someone, Stinger, who's one of my old Rugby Sevens teammates, who does a lot of our social
Very
content.
good.
She does a great job.
Yeah, she does a great job because I was thinking that's one thing that we really need help with at the moment.
Maybe we could work out a bit of a trade.
I think so. I think they're actually something we need to work out. Yeah, I'd love to get involved with what you guys are doing. It's really cool.
I think that'd be awesome.
Really cool. Goals personally over the next little bit. I always like to finish with what's next for you, both personally and professionally. What do you want to achieve?
I think personally, I'd really like to, I think set up the business in a way that when it gets to footy season in 2024, I'm putting the right amount of energy into footy without being so consumed by the business.
What do you think you are at the moment? But honestly, coaches aren't listening.
They are listening.
Okay, we'll just pretend they're not. What percentage are you footy and TFAP?
I think it's
healthy either way, by the way. It's
I think what I find really hard is I actually really love the off season because I can actually integrate my training into my home environment, with just going to gym and doing my running and Pilates and yoga and all that stuff. I do that quite close to home versus my commute out to the Giants is not my favorite drive of the day.
Beautiful.
But it means I can put the right energy into that stuff while still saying yes to a lot of opportunities that I get through TFAP. Because I think it's kind of hard when lots of amazing opportunities are coming up and we've grown so much. It's hard sometimes to constantly be saying no because of footy. Yeah. So that's where I feel a little bit torn sometimes. And that's why I want to make sure that I've got the right people in place so that when it does get to footy, I'm all in on footy, knowing that in the back of my mind
it's still ticking over.
Yeah,
but that would make complete sense in terms of a producer or ex coming in to sort of have a bit of a bridge of gap so it's not all just coming to you all the time.
Yes.
You sort of need someone to help filter through what's important and what's not.
Yeah.
Or not right now.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know if you've had a similar experience, but it's almost like I feel like a lot of the time I have to tick off every single thing in those early days, of what goes ahead and what doesn't.
Yeah, well, I feel Darcy's probably the person who asked this, but I feel like I'm somewhat pretty good at that. In maybe I actually have to get the other way around where I'm actually ticking things off. But I think that's just a founder's little thing that every founder will go through that. You just want to sort of be involved in everything. But then when you get good people around you, you just sort of trust what they're doing and it looks after itself, really.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
I look forward to that day.
Yeah. And TFAP-wise, just building out the team?
Yeah, I think
they're sort of
building out the
flowing in
team.
together. But what was the personally then with sport and footy?
Oh, footy is a flag.
Yeah, of course.
Where we need to probably play finals first. I think flag is...
I like it's hard when you say when do we play? Just make finals first. Then.
Finals is definitely the goal.
Yeah.
That's the shorter term goal for Giants.
Yeah.
Play finals.
Who's your coach at the moment?
Cam Bernasconi.
Yeah. So where is he from? Because he wasn't there when I was...
Yeah, no. So he did a fair bit of academy stuff through Giants and then he came on board... 2023 was his second season, so he took over from Alan the second season in 2022.
Yeah,
and he's a young guy who's full of energy, and he's got us playing a new game plan that I think we've been the last two seasons probably trying to learn. We didn't execute it as well as what we would have liked last year. Our win-loss ratio was not great, and I think this season it's going to be more about executing the game plan, which is the most footy phrase ever. As soon as I said it out loud,
it's somewhat true though. It's there's nothing else to really say. That is what it's about.
Yes.
Really. And scenarios.
Scenarios. I'm actually going to take that feedback.
Take the feedback back because it's genuinely all that matters.
Yeah, I'm here for it.
I'm about it.
Yeah.
And last but not least, give us 3 players you're most excited for. Who's ready for a big year? Who's one that's sort of breaking in? I know you haven't been across it too much as yet with the younger ones, but who are you excited for in 2024?
I reckon Zali Goldsworthy, who was Rising Star in 2023, she is just a firecracker. She's just got that real raw, natural talent. She's a real she's been a footy head since she's been a little kid. She's just obsessed with the game, and she's super talented. I think looking forward to watching Georgia Garnett again this season. Izzy Huntington as well. I'll throw her in the mix.
She's had a season under the belt now with the knee.
Yes, or about half a season. So I think the fact that she's like got back to playing games and then we'll have an off season and pre-season to actually get ready to play. I think it'd be cool, that combination of Gigi and Izzy Huntington in the forward line as well.
Yeah, she's very tall, so that helps.
She is tall, good overhead.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know where I was going there. Hey, thank you so much for coming on today. I really genuinely appreciate it. I feel really educated in everything, and I hope that we did a good job.
Thank you for having me.
Did you have fun? I
really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I did too.
Yeah.
Darcy?
I did too. Really good. Really good.
Glad we're all on the same page.
I me too. Okay.